Welcome back to Prairie Wings. I'm Merle, and this is my buddy.
I'm Cory.
And in this video, we are actually covering things that magically appear in other videos. So what transmission are you overhauling in this truck?
This is a new process 435, 4-speed.
And what are the challenges that you had? Because you don't work on this stuff every day and you don't deal with this stuff every day, but you watch some YouTubes to get this done. And what was missing?
Yeah, they don't cover how to get some of the bearings off of the shafts or the races out of the output covers and stuff like that. So it's nice that Merle was able to give me a hand with that.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny how you don't hear about the snap rings you dealt with and stuff like that. So we'll just talk about that a little bit. Be careful when you aim that thing, Cory. Just looking at this shifter, so that spring in there, this goes on top of the spring, and this interlocks. We'll take a look in the truck. So to get this ring off, you got to compress the spring that we talked about, and then there's these two pins that this hooks into. So if you can compress that and turn it, it just pops out. Okay, stop it. Now pull it back towards the back and back it up. Keep going back, like pull the jack out. Yeah, there you go. Are we clear now? Yeah, perfect. Do you want to go grab that old tire? Okay, it's gonna fall now, but the tire's catching most of it. Okay. Okay. Now get the jack out of there. There we go. Okay, first things first, Cory not having done this, is this a stretch for you to go into this transmission?
A little bit, but I have a manual, which is helpful.
That is one of the keys.
YouTube videos on these transmissions. There's a few of them out there too that go through the whole breakdown, so I don't think it's too bad.
Yeah, and what we're going to do is we're going to tear it down. We're not going to video the whole process of this thing coming apart and everything, but we're going to have it laid out where hopefully if there's some questions or some tricks, things that we run into, and we might get into some theory as well, we'll just present that in the video and hopefully it helps you out. Cory has this ripped apart. I mean, we got a little bit of smear or rust stuff we got to clean up and whatever. It'll be fine. I'm pretty positive of that. Now, what was the problem with this transmission? Why was it pulled out, Cory?
It would slip out a third once in a while.
Okay, so commonly on a transmission that might be slipping out of a gear, if we look in right here, we would see the backside of this be tapered or something worn where my Synchro, and we have to look at the inside of this lock collar, not Synchro, this Synchro. This lock collar isn't worn on the inside, but if you look at the thrust side of the gears, I don't know, you probably can't see it on camera, but I mean, they're polished a bit, but there's nothing worn out. So the plan is right now is what we're going to do is what Cory's going to do actually is he's going to go into the assembly part of this and see if we can check all the measurements, whether we got too much play somehow in here that it's allowed to slip out of third gear. So everything in this transmission though looks extremely good. All right, what we've figured out is this right here, this whole Synchro assembly. The gap in here, there's conflicting measurements, but the biggest measurement, it says that it should be 0.095. So 95 thou, and we are at 0.140, and that is loose in there. So we're 140 thou. So we need to be able to take up some space in here. And according to the instructions, you can add, or in the manual, you can add shims. Well, we only have 25 thou shims here. That ain't gonna do it. So basically there's only a couple things that can dictate the distance in here. One of them is if that bearing in there is thicker. We took a quick measurement of the bearing that comes in the kit. They're the same bearing. The other thing is if the synchros are worn out, this is going to be closer together and it's going to give us bigger gap. So there's a very likelihood that this thing is slipping out of gear because this is really, really sloppy in here. And this can't necessarily hold it in, I'm thinking. So time to take a look in here. And we're having problems getting the synchros, right, Cory?
Yeah.
So we're going to have to dig a little bit deeper, but there's a chance that the reason this is popping out of gear is because this whole assembly is too loose. And I don't know, I'm thinking that the fork should be holding it in, but to me, that just seems like a massive gap, even holding this together. Okay, Cory has done a stellar job getting this apart. And what challenges or what was hard to get apart? What was anything that you had to do?
It actually came apart really easy. The only thing was getting this kind of reverse shaft out. You have to tap out with a brass rod, but other than that, it's been okay. Comparing things to the kit I bought, the rebuild kit with the bearings and the small parts kit, looks like everything's good. So I'm just ordering some new synchros for second gear and third and fourth gear, and then we can start assembly.
Yeah, so the synchros in this thing, if we take a look, it appears, I'm just making a mess. It appears that this is what the problem is. They were kind of chewed up a little bit. So hopefully we can get back to our measurement without having to try and fake shim it, whatever. Hopefully that's the problem. So what special tools did you need to use? That back bearing, they said that it needed to be pulled with a puller.
Yeah, but it was able to tap off. Actually, yeah, just very basic tools, a punch and a little mallet and stuff like that to knock some of the stuff free, and that's about all you needed. So,
but it just blew apart pretty sweet.
Yeah, really quick and easy.
So the part numbers you got here, what is this here? This is the kit you bought?
Yeah, this is the gasket and bearing kit.
Okay, and it's got all the parts up there you can see.
Yeah.
Came as a nice kit.
And then the small parts kit I ordered extra to get the spacers and clips and stuff.
What was that bearing? Was that in here?
This is a small parts kit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. So the only thing that didn't come in the parts that you need are
the synchros.
Synchros. So did you notice anything else in here that had some wear and stuff in it?
A little bit, but actually it's in pretty good shape. I didn't see anything else that was really too worn. Maybe a little bit on this kind of reverse gear, but it's still good.
Yeah, there was some wear in the reverse stuff here. I don't think it's even worth pointing out too hard. It just obviously been ground in a little bit. But yeah, this is a pretty simple transmission. And like I said before, were you procrastinating on it because you thought it might have been harder?
Yeah, I thought it was going to be a little more difficult.
So,
and I guess one thing to mention, if you are ordering your synchros, they want to know what the input shaft bearing is, whether it's a taper or a roller bearing. So once I pull mine apart, it's a taper on the forward anyways. So now that I have that, they can look into getting me some synchros.
So that was the only trick. You have to actually pull it apart a little bit.
Yeah.
All right. So we will continue working on this and we'll catch up in a little bit. Cory has really been doing this transmission on his own. He's asked me a little bit for, advice on things. I helped him push a couple things in and out, but for doing a tranny for the first time, Cory, is there some challenges that you had? Like, we know there is anyway. The case is sitting here and he's got the counter shaft in it right now, but Cory, what were the challenges that you came across?
I think the biggest thing was just getting some of the bearings and races out of the different parts. Sometimes there's like kind of a blind end on them, so you can't just hammer from the other side. So using different pullers or welding that one race out so it would expand and then shrink further. Those little tricks and stuff like that, I would have been stuck on my own for sure.
Okay, so you also had a few issues with snap rings, but what I'm going to do is let's turn the camera around, and we'll look at the parts individually, and I want you to kind of tell us what you did. This is the input housing, and this is where Cory's going to start.
Yeah, so we had to get this race out of this input housing. In order to do that, Merle advised me to just run a weld in there so that it would flash heat that, and then it couldn't expand because it's inside the housing. And when it shrunk, it just was able to, it was actually a little bit loose. I could wiggle it around with my hand, but we had to just tap it out with a slide hammer to get it out the rest of the way.
So there's also another video kind of describing that a little bit more, how and why things happen.
And then on the other side, the actual bearing for that, the taper bearing, we couldn't get it off. The puller was just snapping the outer ring. So we ended up clipping off the cage and then having to grind through the edge just about all the way through and then hit it with a cold chisel to crack it, and then we could pull it off. We tried drilling it. It was just too hard to drill a series of holes and then hit it with a chisel, but we had to just use a very small little grinder, die grinder, and Dremel tool to kind of grind that out, and then we could chisel it.
On this, so you got to be really careful that you don't grind into the shaft. We did end up having a tiny little nick in it, and looking back, I have never welded an outer, like a bearing that is on a shaft with the shaft through the middle. It's always been the outer race, never the inner. What happened when we welded this? What was the result inside that you had to deal with later?
There was a little bit of spatter. We left the seal in, so there wasn't too much, but I mean, the spatter did just flake off because this is cast iron and the weld doesn't stick to that. So
yeah, so if we were taking this and gonna weld this off, because it should in theory work the same way because it's restrained expansion, instead of grinding this, what would have been the issue that we might have had with this one?
we would have had to really protect the shaft and the gears, stuff like that, so there was no wild spatter on it.
Yeah, so if you are going to do that, it definitely would need to be wrapped up because spatter wouldn't come off this like it does off cast iron. All right, let's carry on. What do we got with this here?
This one we ended up being able to pull out with a puller, but because it's aluminum housing, we didn't want to like push on the bottom of that, so we did put some extra steel or aluminum in there at the bottom to give us a little bit of spread on our pressure.
And that we just used, I don't remember, you did that mainly. Was it a 2 or a 3 jaw puller that we used in that?
It was a 3 jaw puller.
Okay, yeah, just simple stuff that you can buy at a local, wherever, cheap store probably. Yeah. The stuff I have is a little more money, but it will work the same for how much pressure is in this.
Got new Synchros, got a new 3-4 ordered. They do need to know whether your input is a roller bearing or a tapered bearing, so make sure you have that information before you order your 3-4 Synchro. And we did get a second gear Synchro as well. This one costs more money than that whole assembly. Not sure why, but.
So did you notice a difference with this assembly?
Yes, so we had some extra play in our last one that we figured might have been causing our third gear to slip out. And so the height or the thickness of this compared to this one actually should work out. This is that little bit thicker. This is just worn out, I think. So probably part of the reason why it was slipping out of third.
Absolutely. We did find another possibility that could be causing it. We'll get to that. Okay, moving down the line here. Let's just talk about the snap rings. Like, I believe on the output shaft is one of the snap rings that was a little bit difficult to get off.
Yeah, we had to just, again, use some screwdrivers to pry off the snap ring for that back bearing. It just took a bit of time and a bit of effort, but...
I'll just grab the plier that we were using in conjunction with the screwdriver. So we just took and spread the snap ring with those pliers and then had to use a screwdriver to get it off.
Yeah.
All right, and moving down.
The last thing we kind of encountered was the bushing on our output shaft was quite sloppy. So kind of worn out, really grooved and kind of a mess. So we tracked down another one. It is slightly longer, as you can see. So we're going to see if we have the room and clearance on our shaft for that when we start assembly, or we can cut this down a little bit before we install it.
Yeah, so what he's talking about is potentially we might not push it in as far so that the bushing might be able to sit a little bit past on this side as well as the other side. Now, something very interesting on this bushing. So this bushing, I don't know if you can see in the inside, like it was toast on the one side, like a lot of play. How easy was it to get this bushing?
Actually, it wasn't too bad. Phoned around to a few shops, but we found them online. There's lots of different part numbers and vehicles that these fit into, but the sizing was all the same on all of them. This one seems like it should work for us. So there's two different sizes. This is a small one, which is a 1.5 inch shaft. Some of them were over 2 inches for the large size. So you got to know that too.
Yeah, well, this transmission's unique because this is a highboy, so it actually has a transmission that's separate from the transfer case, which is called a divorced transfer case. So it has a yoke, which would be different than if the transfer case bolted to the back of the transmission. Now, the thing that I found interesting is Ford used this basic bushing in a lot of their transmissions, including the yoke on the output transmission, but that totally makes sense. So this bushing is 1 5/8 inches, OD 1.5 inch ID, and it's 1.5 inch long. I think the spec on this bushing was actually 1.63.
Yes.
Yeah, and so we might have a little bit of difference, and we might have to take and ream this bushing after it's pushed in, but we'll see what that's like. Anyway, Cory, is there anything else that you want to say about, difficulties, and would you do this again?
Yeah, it's not too bad. There is some good YouTube videos out there for rebuilding these things, but there is differences, obviously, type of vehicle, because these new process 435s came in different vehicles, Dodges and Fords and different things. So you got to know what you're dealing with. Make sure, you know what your vehicle is, and make sure you get the right parts for the transmission that you have.
So on the videos that you watched, did we cover any of the holes that were missed on your highboy?
Well, yeah, they don't talk about getting the bearing races out and pressing bearings and stuff like that. They kind of just bypass that and make it look so easy. When you get into it and you find that you got to replace some bearings and seals and stuff like that you don't have the tools for, I wish they would have showed more of that. So this is great having the help for it. Okay,
so the one last thing that I want to show is we're going to go over to the press and take a look at the press. And how did, for example, this bearing here, it wasn't just slip on. We actually had to put it in the press and press it on. Now, for people that don't own a press, when I was working in shops and as well here, there are people that come in and ask me to press stuff on. So the key thing when you're pressing a bearing on, even though these are both extremely hard shafts, you don't want galling, you don't want to have any issues pushing it on. But basically, what did we have to do to prevent that?
We found a piece of tubing that fit exactly over top of our shaft and just sat on the top of our bearing. And then we, again, set up our press and used some WD-40 to just lubricate that a little bit as we pressed it on.
Yeah, lube. So we'll go over and take a look at the press. This is the press that I have. And Cory, this is the first time you used a press like this. How did you know when the bearing was on?
Well, you just kind of watch your pressure gauge, and as it presses on, it goes on really easy. And then as soon as it bottoms out, you can start to see that pressure start to rise pretty quickly. So you know it's seated. So
perfect. I call that success. We're out on a test drive. What do you think, Cory?
I'm pretty happy.
So how did you do this tranny build? What was the steps that you did? Looked up YouTubes?
Watched lots of different YouTubes on rebuilding the new process for 435 and transmissions. And then downloaded the manual and read through that as well, and had the manual there with the parts diagrams and everything like that. Then phoned around and found a rebuild kit. Needed to get some Synchro gears after I had the transmission apart. That's really about the only thing I needed to order after the fact, once I knew what was in there.
So how important was it to read the instructions very detailed?
Very important. I missed a step at the very end with the bearing or the gap, or what do you call that? End gap?
The end play and the output, yeah.
End play and the output shaft, yeah. And it was a little bit too tight, so I just had to pull that front cover off and set that again. So.
Yeah, but would this be something that you would try again with all the information you found online and what we're adding?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it wasn't terrible. It's pretty straightforward, this transmission. It's not a lot of complicated stuff in there, really.
And the shifter, I mean, the thing is solid. It just is, I don't know, this truck is so cool. Love going for a drive in it every time. Anyway, hopefully this helps you guys out with any transmission stuff you're doing. You're going to have to watch some YouTubes to do the rebuild, and you're going to have to do, I guess, probably be a good idea to think about what we talked about if you're going to dive into it. But I think it's something that anybody can do if you're not scared of it. And the biggest thing holding you up is a little bit of fear and common sense. So put that out the window and let's get her done. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.